Do you know the name Agatha Christie? Yeah. You know her story about Agatha Christie, of course, great mystery writer, but she was married to an archaeologist. And they were interviewing her one day about that, and they said, what's it like being married to an archaeologist? And she said, it's wonderful. The older I get, the more interesting he finds me. What if that is how God looks at things? The older you get, got more track record, got more to bring to the table, got more bumps and scrapes. The mission of the Festival of Wisdom and Grace is stated as being exploring, discovering meaning and purpose in the second half of life. What if the second half of life is when you put it all together? What if that's the flowering of things? What if those are the best moments? That's the way Agatha Christie looked at it. The older she got, her husband was intensely interested in her as an archaeologist. What if God's interested in you today because of where you are in life, and we bring to the table that which we could not have brought some time ago? So we are excited to be with you because we've been engaged a little bit ourselves in a little exploration of meaning and purpose in the second half of life that has to do with exactly what that purpose is about, and we have a chance to share it with you today. And so we're very, very grateful for that. The way I'll get into this with you is 12 years ago, this is about 4 years before I was elected bishop and sent to serve in South Georgia. 12 years ago, I was serving as senior minister at First United Methodist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. And this is a church that has a lot of great ministries. And it just seemed appropriate to begin asking one question, and the church was willing to do it. And that question was, what needs to happen in this community that will not happen unless a church does it? And the key is you don't ask your church members. You ask the mayor and the police chief and the school superintendent and the social service agencies and YMCA and YWCA. You ask around. First of all, it amazes them that you would want to know that. But you say to the mayor and the county commission, what keeps you up at night? What's something you've been wanting, desiring to happen in this community, but you just can't make it happen? And it won't happen unless a church does it. And we did that. And you get a long list. The process that we developed, Dan Pizzette, who's a DS in the Western North Carolina Conference, has written a book about. It outlines it here in Expanding the Connection. But basically what you do is you take that long list of things the community has told you need to happen here, but we can't make it happen. And you look through there and say, given what we know about our congregation and the gifts God has given us, we can't do everything. But where is there a match here between what we resonate with and what the community is saying? What we might call a motivational match. And you look through that. And for us, it was this one phrase that kept coming up again and again. Something for people living with dementia and their families. I knew that sounded wonderful, but I also knew I didn't have a clue what that meant. And so, to me, saying I'm going to pray about something is not a perfunctory statement. It's a way of saying, Lord, I have no clue, but I'm open. And after praying for a year, I received a phone call from a young adult named Daphne Johnston. And you can imagine sitting in the office and the secretary says, you got to pick up the call. And Daphne says, Lawson, I see the vision. I said, what are you talking about? Daphne, background in gerontology, degree in gerontology. She had run senior living centers for 15 years. And just casting the vision, what needs to happen, resonated with her. And the Lord sent her to us. She was already a church member. So do we have a picture? There's Daphne. Thank you. Yeah. Can you see the energy right there? And so then with the two of us, by the way, think about the Methodist movement. I think about this a lot, about Wesley in the early days. A movement doesn't come pre-done. You build the bridge every day as you walk on it. And that's what we did. There was nobody to tell us we couldn't do it. No rules, no regulations, because nobody's doing much for people living with dementia. And so here we are. And so we had a church that was very permission giving, and I said to them, could we hire Daphne to do the homework and see what this might mean? And one of the things she did was to invite Dr. David Geldmacher, the lead researcher in dementia at University of Alabama Medical School, to come speak at the church. We didn't know if the community was interested. They had said they might be. We thought if we get 50 to 75 people here, this is going to be good. 400 came. I said, Daphne, you are hired. But she spent a year researching, because we wanted to know what is something quality-wise we could offer. Not, I don't want to be demeaning or degrading to anybody's ministry, but we weren't really trying to duplicate a daycare situation. But we were saying, how do you add value to people's lives? And how do you do something that's not being done anywhere now? And after a year of study, visiting places, seeing what we don't want to do, meeting people like Robin Dill in Lawrenceville, Georgia, who's written books about this, she came up with the model that we call the Respite for All model now. And now, so I'll just walk you through what would happen, what she put together. Art therapy, pet therapy, music therapy, exercise, community service projects, 65-voice choir for people that live with dementia, and they do concerts, because music stays with you a long time. And other churches that began to expand, from Montgomery First to Birmingham, Dothan. There are now, at the beginning of this year, there were 40. We've now launched 47 respite ministries around the country. Gary Rideout, when did you launch your respite?
We started in February this past year.
Past February, Tampa, Florida. So he's so what we do, we don't micromanage it. We just support people in launching these, and we have coaching calls every month with the director, and we have budgets and resources and everything people need to use. But just thanking God that there's something that makes a difference. One of the things that really helped me make the transition from this is not a program that we're just doing something else for these poor folks was Dr. David Geldmacher, that lead researcher I told you about. So he's in Birmingham. He doesn't really know what we're doing down here in Montgomery. But in Alabama, you often, if you're diagnosed with dementia, you often go to Dr. Geldmacher at UAB because he's the researcher. And so we got a call from him. Here's what had happened. He noticed his clients that have living with dementia, some of them were showing a greatly enhanced quality of life, and he knew that it wasn't the medical model. The medicine hadn't changed. And so he began to ask them, well, are you doing anything different in your life? Are you doing anything different? And every one of them said, I've been going to the respite ministry at First United Methodist Church. So Geldmacher calls us and says, could I send my staff down there? Because I don't know what's in the water down there. But people are getting better, and they don't get better usually in this situation. So it's support groups for families, but it's also 4 day a week now. If you pulled up in the parking lot, you'd be greeted by men and women who are our volunteers. They'll open the door, walk you into the building. The care partner just drives on off. They've got 4 hours now to go do what they want to do, and you come in. It's the most joyous, happy experience that people could have. We've got a couple of videos that are just a couple of minutes in length.
I started our respite ministry 10 years ago in the basement of the church. We had no paid consultant, no strategic plan, and now fast forward 10 years later, we have almost 40 respite communities across the country. Respite provides relief, purpose, meaning. It's real hope for families living with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Everyone I have ever known that has volunteered or taken a chance to try out respite is immediately hooked. There really isn't a ministry we do around here that's more fun than respite ministry.
Faith groups can be an asset to help the community do what it needs but doesn't know how to do. It's been illuminating to me to see how the community resonates with this. You have these diverse people coming together and discovering this is where we need to be. It's about everybody reclaiming joy together. Sometimes it's joy in the face of living with dementia. Sometimes it's the volunteers who have their own struggles, finding that the people living with dementia bring joy into their lives.
I think about my father. He had dementia, and we didn't have a program like this. It would have been a game changer for him. One of the things I knew getting into this in Dothan is that the things that we weren't able to have and provide for my father, we could do that here and be a place to come and be with friends and be social. You can't cure Alzheimer's, but it sure does cure loneliness.
Out of the original ministry in Montgomery, 6 daughters, children across the country, they saw what it did for their parents, and they started ministries in their own cities.
If we believe people are created in the image of God, then that means we're not limited to our cognitive abilities. There's still a person there. The most fundamental core beliefs are tested by how we deal with this particular issue in life.
Not only have we got this inspiring volunteer opportunity for people to serve, we tell people they can do it on their own time. The first time they come, probably 80% of them are hooked.
If I don't come to respite during the week, I'm not me. It adds so much to my life, and to be able to come and give back.
They still have abilities left. It may not be like they used to do it or how we think they should do it, but there are many things they still are able to do, and I love to highlight those things. I think one of the beautiful things about being at Respite Care is that we all don't understand exactly what we're supposed to be doing, but we know it feels right to be together.
They come and see it's about being present with people. It begins to dawn on them, well, this is what we do. This is what our faith has taught us to do, and it's enlivening. What they have believed is now actually happening in their lives.
My mind used to be great, but it's not anymore. But it helps when I come in here because it brings that back to me. It's a wonderful thing that these people have done.
It is so much more than 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the middle of the day. It is a life-giving source for these families. Everyone is living with dementia. It's not just the person with diagnosis.
The training makes all the difference in the world. Every person is different, and almost every day is different. I get surprised every day. But you have that basic core of what will calm the situation, what will make a person smile again.
Part of the beauty of it to me is they don't even have to know a lot about the church. It's open to all because it addresses the needs of all.
They have finally found a community of people that understand them, that want to embrace them, that want to nurture them and see that they still have life to give.
It touches everyone's heart, and it immediately breeds joy in everyone who participates.
At the end of the day, they remember love. They can't tell their caregiver exactly what they did, but they remember we were here together, and you really just have to show up to give love.
Respite is a chance to make new friends. It is so rare to be able to make a new friend after you've had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or any other kind of dementia, right? Respite creates that space.
But the thing I want to move to now, because we do have all that information available, we can talk anytime you would like to about that, is about the same time Daphne and I were beginning to do this, Bishop Ken Carter, C-A-R-D-E-R, now retired, living in South Carolina, was beginning to stop teaching at Duke so he could be the caregiver for his wife, Linda. And he has written this book, Ministry with the Forgotten, because it's very easy for people living with dementia to suddenly not have friends around, family around, church around, and can get very lonely. So we read the book and realized this is a textbook, biblically based textbook, looking at dementia through a biblical theological lens that resonates with exactly what we're doing. And so we are now working together. He's a great resource, and we thank God for that. This book is available for study in churches, and Dr. John Bell has led a study in our church, and John actually developed a PowerPoint presentation to go with it. So should you ever desire to do a book study in your church, there's a study guide, and now there's a PowerPoint that goes with it as well. So as we've all been working together, we began to realize there are a lot of wonderful people feeling a call to ministry for people living with dementia. And so we began to get to know them around. And so almost 1 year ago, last November, we had a gathering here at Lake Junaluska of people from all over the country. And we formed what is called the Dementia Caring Ministries Network in the United Methodist Church. And this little white card I've got over here is a way to get your name on that mailing list if you want to know more about that, because we just see this as an area. It's a little bit like going to the city of Bristol. John Wesley did, and realizing there's a whole world of ministry here that you're not stepping on anybody's turf because they're not doing anything. And yet these are our church members as well as people living in the community. So this goes on for about 10 years, and I'm basically a pastor. So here's what I started noticing. I know it helps the people living with dementia. That's why Dr. Geldmacher wanted to know about it. I know it helps their families. They're getting support. They're being more hopeful. But how is it that my church members are saying this is the most significant thing I've ever been involved in my life? And why aren't they burning out? Why am I not twisting anybody's arm? And why are they serving for years and years and years and saying, best day of the week? I always believed church could be like this. Didn't know anything like this. Why did Bill Ellis say, I learned more in the first 4 hours at Respite than I did in 4 years of Bible study before that? What is it? So I began to wonder, okay, that's really great. Anecdotal evidence is really great. But what's underlying happening here to my church members? And when I talk to the Gary Rideouts of this world and other clergy, what can I tell them this is? So we came up with this idea. We need to do a research project based on the volunteers, not those living with dementia and not their families. We know that's working, but there's something bigger happening, that we're seeing a level of vitality within our church and among our church members, and I don't know what to do with that. And so we designed a project, and we took 12 of them, which would be 20% of our 60-member volunteer group at Montgomery First. We took them through a 6-week study of Carter's book, led by Dr. Bell, and now we have qualitative data and quantitative data that we didn't have before, so we could go beyond anecdotal. And that's really what we'd like to share with you today, so we could take a look at. So Dr. Bell, thank you for coming, and anything else I have omitted, please add to it.
Oh, I will. So I have to tell you about Lawson Bryan. I retired a number of years ago, and I've known Lawson and Cheryl for many years. So Lawson was our senior pastor and then later became our bishop. And he called, we actually on a Wednesday night at church supper, he walked over and he sat at my table and he said, now John, you're about to retire. And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, let me give you a little word of advice. Take some time, maybe as much as a year, and you and Lorna, my wife sitting back there, you and Lorna decide how this retirement thing is going to work. And I said, Lawson, that's good advice, because just yesterday we were sitting in the kitchen and Lorna looked at me and said, honey, can I ask you a question about retirement? And I said, what? She said, this retirement thing, does that mean you're going to be here every day? So I said, your timing is great, Lawson. I will do that. And Lorna and I will figure out what retirement's going to be like. And so everything was great. About 2 weeks went by. My phone rang, and it was Lawson. He said, hey, John, this is Lawson. I said, hey, Lawson, how are you? He said, I'm good. I need you to lead the long-range plan at church. And I said, who is this? Is this the guy that gave me the advice? Great inspiration sitting right back there. And it was a delight to know that I was going to be able to do some work with Lawson. And Lawson and I led the study that we're about to talk about. So what we thought we knew a lot about respite. Respite's about 12 years old at First United Methodist Church in Montgomery, and we thought we kind of knew what Respite was all about. But God had other ideas as we began to study Bishop Carter's book and look at what Respite really meant to a lot of people. This is the Respite Triangle. Our friends with dementia are at the apex of that triangle. They're the people we serve, the people we love, and the ministry was designed for them, sort of, because the bottom left-hand corner was really the focus of the ministry initially, and that was God bless caregivers. They need some time. What could a caregiver do with 4 hours a day? Simple things like go to the hairdresser or the barber, go to the doctor, take a nap, go buy groceries. I mean, they need the respite care time. And it was so obvious when we started this ministry, and they were, our caregivers were a little hesitant to leave their loved one, and then gradually it became easy for them. Not only easy to leave, but joyfully they left their person with us. But we weren't sure about the third corner, other than the volunteers gave us a lot of anecdotal data, and that is how wonderful it is to be a volunteer at Respite, how it makes their day, how it makes them feel so great about what they're doing. And so we knew that, but we didn't know much else. So we thought, let's study Dr. Carter's book, let's focus on the volunteers, and let's find out what they tell us. So we knew, as I said, about the caregivers, and we took that information with us into the study. We knew about our friends with dementia. We knew, for instance, the information we were getting from UAB that there were changes in the way in their cognitive abilities to a degree. There were changes. There certainly was more joy as they went to see their physician. As I said, we had a lot of anecdotal data from the volunteers, but we needed something more specific. A focus of the study that really brought Lawson to have the study was young ministers, or ministers in general. When he was speaking about the possibility of a respite ministry being established, he would get pushback. Well, we're not a clinical establishment, and what's it going to cost, and how much room does it take, and and he would get this a lot. Lawson, we're about making disciples for Jesus Christ. We're not a medical facility. And he would get pushback often. And so Lawson said, we need to know what's happening to church members, not just our friends with dementia and the caregivers. So that was the purpose of the study. We wanted to collect data, and we wanted to bring together 12 strong volunteers with longevity in the respite ministry to find out what their thoughts were. And the lens to do that was Dr. Carter's book. So for 6 weeks, we met for an hour and a half, and we took chapters of the book prescribed in an order that that Bishop Carter gave us, and we did a book study. We did explain to the volunteers, we want to hear from you, and we hope this book will help you. And we knew the book was going to open some gates, some floodgates, and indeed, that's exactly what happened. So here are our volunteers. I'm going to move over here where I can read it, or I won't read it, but I just want to point out a couple of things. Larry McLemore and Harry Curlin have been with the ministry as long as it has existed, and you can look right on down the line. These were people who knew respite. These were people who had been either on the ground floor or soon after, or certainly had at least 5 years of experience with us. They could speak to respite and to their transformation as volunteers. So we collected qualitative data. We recorded all 6 sessions, and that was fun, an hour and a half recording on my telephone, going through and listening to everything and documenting everything that was said. We also gave homework assignments. They knew if I had anything to do with it, they were going to have to go home and do some additional reading and some writing. And they did. They did a number of homework assignments, and then we collected every one of their responses in not only through the audios, but also written responses. These slides are really important, so I'm going to take each one of them and I'm going to tell you, these are the voices of these volunteers. This will guide us to the aha moment we did not expect. Okay, respite is immediate. I regularly see the difference Respite makes in those living with dementia. Respite creates a community of care in which habits of love, compassion, and caring are burnished into the lives of the volunteer. We do not think ourselves into a new way of living. We live ourselves into a new way of thinking. Respite is living a process of change. I am less self-centered as a result of my work at Respite. Respite has centered me more on the needs of others and filled me with joy in getting out of myself to focus on my fellow man. By the way, I will say that many of these volunteers were consummate professionals in other professions. Some were in professions that demanded that they be very focused on themselves, and so it was uplifting for them. Respite has freed me from smothering self-reliance, too much focus on detail, inflexible thinking. I'm a more flexible servant. Respite has taught me to be in the moment, to appreciate small gifts, and be open to the unexpected. That is where God is. God speaks in the unexpected, unconventional, and unplanned moments at Respite. Volunteers learn to watch and listen for these moments. As a Respite volunteer, I have learned radical patience to listen and make sure I understand what the friend with dementia is asking of me to do or what they are trying to do. I am more attuned to others. Through Respite, one recognizes the presence of God in those living with dementia. Respite Ministry provides a joy and love unlike any other ministry. Respite enters the hearts of ministers, congregation, participants, and volunteers in ways one cannot imagine. All I can say is, come and see and feel the presence of God as never before. I was very hesitant to volunteer as I thought I would leave depressed and sad as I did when my mother-in-law had dementia for years and had no interaction with anyone most days. However, I learned that I was, as a volunteer, am the recipient of so much joy. I leave Respite now with a full heart and thanksgiving to God for the opportunity to be with all of His children. My Respite day is the highlight of my week. Respite made me realize I had misjudged some of my fellow volunteers about whom I had misconceived opinions before the camaraderie of Respite. I now consider them close friends. The Respite Ministry offers a bond of unconditional joy and love with people that would otherwise never have been part of my life. I have learned to love unconditionally. My faith in the indestructibility of love has been strengthened. The connections I have made at Respite in 6 years have been life-changing. Every time I enter the room, I feel with great confidence that surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. Respite is inclusive of religious affiliation, race, gender, personal and professional background. As volunteers, we quickly realize that all friends with dementia are facing similar challenges, and the usual traits on which discrimination is based quickly fade to insignificance. In the absence of society's prejudices, a volunteer quickly learns to focus on each participant's common humanity with love and compassion. Respite is a transformational process. I will tell you that Respite at First United Methodist Church volunteers are Jewish, they're Episcopalian, they're Methodist, they're Baptist. Actually, some of our participants have left our church and formed another church as a result of the recent division that we've gone through, and they come back every week regardless because Respite is that important to them. It is an amazing place, and certainly African American, white, across the board, we are together in that room every day. I see theology lived every day at Respite through gentle touch, genuine smiles, the holding of hands, and the love felt by everyone that can only be through God. It has become obvious to me that God is known and experienced beyond our intellect. Through my observance of friends with dementia's body memory while singing hymns, and particularly in taking communion, God is in every cell of our body, not just our brains. As a result of my volunteering at Respite, I look deeper into people now. I look deeper into people's eyes. I try harder to discern what they are feeling or trying to tell me. I first thought that I was at Respite to take care of our friends with dementia. It then dawned on me very quickly that we all are at Respite to share a community of love and hope as we care for each other. When I retired, I began studying theology. I began to study the footsteps of Jesus rather than following them. Respite reoriented my faith from passive to active. Respite has added more joy and purpose to my life. Volunteering at Respite has made me not just more aware of the needs of others, but that Christ has called me to serve the least, the last, the lost, not simply to write a check. Respite has provided me an opportunity for the ministry of presence and a place to abandon all the stuff of life and love unconditionally. Laugh, dance, pray, play games, work puzzles, make art, and sing. Before volunteering at Respite, I would never have initiated a discussion that included any assessment of a dementia patient. I might say, "How is she?" but would be uncomfortable taking it any further. Now I have learned that a care partner needs to talk. I have learned to be a listening ear and am not afraid to have a much-needed conversation with a caregiver. God has chosen the weak, the vulnerable, the powerless as preferential recipients and means of God's grace-filled action. We Respite volunteers, as agents of God's salvation, are contributing to the ministry of those living with dementia. But more importantly, perhaps, those with dementia are contributing greatly to our own ministry and to our own salvation. So we took all of the words that our volunteers said, and we wanted to see what that looked like. And we created a word wall, and you'll see unconditional love was one of the phrases that came out more than any, and it's certainly very visible if you come to our Respite ministry or any Respite ministry. Hands and feet of Christ, friends, Christ's presence, and so forth. But you can see these incredible words, inclusion. So a visual was something we wanted. It really makes all that they said stand out. And when we showed this to the volunteer class, they were very moved. But we also wanted some other kinds of data. And so we did a questionnaire and we asked them to answer the questionnaire. Now this is difficult to see, so I'm going to walk over and I'm going to tell you what these are. My understanding of dementia, the green line was before they volunteered with Respite, and the blue line as a result of their volunteering. My comfort level interacting with people living with dementia, green before, blue after. My personal understanding of unconditional love, the green was before Respite, the blue after. My sense of being self-absorbed, the green before, the blue after. My level of patience. This was a biggie. There was a great deal of discussion about patience. You know, we live in a pretty impatient world. Everything is instantaneous. If you don't believe that, try teaching little ones. You better be fast, and you better change a lot of things going on at one time. My level of patience certainly increased as a result of working with our friends with dementia. My experience with joy in ministry, and this was a little bit of a startler for us. Perhaps sometimes as we work through ministry, we don't necessarily think of joy and ministry. We should, but it's real obvious in Respite. My sense of God's presence in my life, my experience of being the hands and feet of Jesus. There were people who said to us, I didn't really understand that until I began to volunteer in Respite, and I saw it every day, and then I realized I was it. My comfort level in sharing good news with others, my personal growth in discipleship. So you can see the blue here. Blue, remember, is after participation. my understanding of ministry to and ministry with. A really important distinction here is Dr. Carter's book is not called Ministry to the Forgotten, it's Ministry with the Forgotten, the with being key here. We are all in it together. If you come to Respite Ministry, and this happens all the time, especially new volunteers will come over to one of us and say, is Phil a friend or a volunteer? Because at Respite, there is no difference. Everybody wears the same name tag. We all do every single activity. We eat together, we sing together, we work together. And so it makes a huge difference. My understanding of connecting the Bible to Respite Ministry. And one of the things that Lawson did a wonderful job in the book study, and that Dr. Carter really does a great job, is the theology of Respite Ministry. The Bible, where does it talk about in the Bible, and how is Respite Ministry grounded in biblical teachings? So this is really, as we went through the data and I began to share the data and Lawson and I began to look at it, the class had gone and we had all the data and I had analyzed the data and brought it back and we had a little session and Lawson said, oh my. I said, what is it, Lawson? He said, we are describing what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, because what that means, if you look at the fruit of the Spirit, every single thing, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Every single one of those. We heard the volunteers talking about being better at, growing in their discipleship through the Respite Ministry. So the aha moment was, the Respite is a laboratory of discipleship where the fruit of the Spirit can actually be seen and experienced. Now, you know what? I would think ministers and people who work in churches who want the means to ensure that they really are developing disciples would look at Respite and realize it's a win-win-win-win, because you're helping our friends with dementia, you're certainly helping our caregivers, but if you are strengthening discipleship in the volunteers, that's an amazing thing. And you can see it happening and hear it happening. So Respite is a disciple-making ministry. That was an aha moment for us. So here's what we learned. We certainly are still going to focus on our friends with dementia, obviously. Our caregivers in the left-hand part of that triangle, paramount, and we want to serve them. But here's something else that dawned on us. Our friends with dementia, sadly, are not with us always. There's great turnover in a Respite ministry because, for the most part, many times, more times than not, dementia is a terminal illness. So we lose our friends, and in so doing, very often we lose our caregivers, although many of our caregivers come back and they are volunteers. But for the most part, those two groups leave us. The volunteers stay. Year after year after year, the volunteers come. And so as they're burnished through this process, this is what happens. They become disciples. Simple as that, disciples, and they become stronger disciples. So that was the aha moment, and Bishop,
thank you.
Take it from here.
Well,
it's a very emotional thing for both of us.
Yeah.
So,
and partly because in the local church, we want to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We're not just doing busy work. So when we see something that we really didn't know what God was doing in it, and I always stress to people, we didn't attend a seminar, or listen to a speaker, read a book. The Lord led us to this by asking the question, what needs to happen? And then by following the leading of the Spirit. But we didn't know that the larger plan God had was, we're going to show you how to have a disciple-making process in your church. That when everybody else has gone, you've got disciples. So where we are now, and what I'm having fun doing with these 47 respite communities we've established across the country, from Washington State to New York and 17 states in between, is we are working with discipleship. You know the name of the group in our denomination that provides resources and programming for disciple making? Discipleship Ministries. They're interested in things that make disciples. Lisa Jean Hefner, raise your hand. She's with Discipleship Ministries, and she's here with us, and we appreciate that. So what we just shared with you is the first public release of the data, and we're just learning what we have here in our hands, a disciple-making ministry that looks like it's a ministry for people living with dementia and their families, and it is, but that it in fact has implications for the life of the entire local church. And let me say it to you this way, what I'm now able to say 10 years down the road to myself and to clergy is, so when someone leaves the ministry for one reason or another, you've now got, in our case, we've got 60 high-performing, vital disciples of Jesus Christ. Local church, pastor, how are you going to use this engine of vitality you now have in your local church? Don't overlook these people. They've been doing ministry now. They're ready to go, and they won't settle for doing ministry to anymore. They're going to be doing ministry with in every way. So don't waste what you've got in our dementia care ministries, because these people have a lot to offer us. And one of the ways that they're challenging us right now, for instance, is that they get to know the people with whom they're eating lunch every day and being there with them. And so they've said, when somebody reaches a point in the disease where they can no longer come down here, we can't just act like we don't know them. We now are part of their story. And so it is the volunteers themselves who've come up with the thing we're trying to live into now called Respite to Go. Because what the care partners say to us is, my husband, my wife benefit so much from the socialization, the community being here. When they can no longer come, I don't want them to lose that community. So we said, why don't we take the community to them? And we'll go in groups of 2 or 3 and be at their house. And if they go into a care facility or a nursing home, we'll go there too. So that what they have begun in respite can continue wherever they go. That was the organic development of ministry, the way a movement develops, where we just try to see which way the Spirit's moving people, and we just resource it in that way. Now, we've also noticed a lot of young people. It's not uncommon for us to have 50-year-olds in our dementia ministry, and people of all ages, actually. It's also interesting how this attracts younger people. In Dothan, Alabama, First Methodist Church, Katie Holland, who you saw earlier talking about her daddy, Katie developed a program during the summer called STARS, Students Trained in Alzheimer's and Respite. And these are high school students who get training. And now think of what that means to their families when they have people in the family that have dementia. But what they do, I learned, is what they do is they use their experience working in the summer in our ministry for their college entrance essay. Let me tell you what I've been doing. Let me tell you what I've been learning. So making disciples of Jesus Christ is the fundamental goal here. And the question is, how does Respite do that? And we're just now on the front end of being able to define that. Lastly, I'll just mention we appreciate the Alzheimer's Foundation of America giving us the Innovation Award, because they said this is one of the few areas that we see that the way you do this, your model, can be replicated all over the country. It's not unique, so unique to one setting that it can't be there. Now, just briefly, I'll say cost-wise, we know what it costs us to do it every day, but nobody ever gets turned away, because we have people who come to us and say, I've been paying $20 an hour for a sitter. What you're charging me here is a lot less. But if somebody can't come, we have funds we use to scholarship them, because we have people who say, I'll give you money, so nobody has to be turned away. We have foundations that do that. I offer this to you so you can just be aware of something I think is an incredible work of God going on in the world among those who are forgotten. Maybe that shouldn't be surprising to us, that the more we lean into that, the more we come alive in vitality. That's what I'm about, vitality in the local church. And when I see it happening like this.
I want to add one more thing too. Dothan has been an amazing respite. They've gone above and beyond and been very creative. One of the issues that bothers me and bothers all the volunteers with whom we spoke is that when a caregiver loses their loved one, a lot of times there's not a bridge. And so they go home and they're lonely and they're sad, and they've lost another family, and that's the respite family. So Dothan created something called the Rosemary House. And Rosemary is the herb of memory. It is a symbol of the foundation that Lawson is talking about. And they had a house on their property near the church. They renovated that house and turned it into a Rosemary house where caregivers can come, even if they're coming to respite, even if they're leaving their loved one, they could come over. But there are counselors there during the week. There are all kinds of videos. For instance, what do you do when incontinence hits? How do I deal with that at home? Well, there are videos that can help you with that. There's a lounge where they can just come and be together and sit and together. So we don't have one of those at First Methodist Church, but we're going to. And it's a wonderful thing. So the idea is to try to support people even when they're not coming to us anymore, to keep that going. I needed to mention that because I made it sound like they just vaporized, and they don't. We really want to support them.
Yeah,
further.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, can you think of something while we're talking about this, a question you wonder about?
You mentioned respite care as being for people with dementia.
Right.
Is it open to others?
Yeah, perfect. Well, here's what I tell people. We can show you how to set this up and do it. We can help you do it because churches have buildings and caring people. That's why the overhead is so low. But what I can't tell you is, until you start it, the opportunities you're going to have. And that's what you're just pointing out. Is it limited to people living with dementia? Absolutely not. Here's the other thing I've learned. The community can tell when the church is on to something. You don't have to call the paper. You don't have to ask them to come. When this starts happening to the community will be passed through your door, and they'll come in and say, well, my loved one doesn't have dementia, but he's mighty lonely. Could he be down here? I got the Dothan people contacted me the other day and said, you're not going to believe this. Lady coming today, she's in her 50s. She was struck by a car, and it is so much brain damage, she's had memory loss. And her 80-year-old mother works outside the home to support the family and didn't know where this lady could go. She's coming to respite. Well, so we have people who have a variety of needs.
Especially stroke victims, Down syndrome. We have a young woman who just suffered brain damage at birth, and she comes. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have one person that really doesn't have any issues, memory loss at all. He's just 102.
Yeah,
So
we've got some of those too.
Yeah. Oh, 102. Yeah.
We had a lovely wedding one day. Our 100-year-old bride, she was 100 years old, and we had a wedding. Just a fun day with the wedding, but she was the bride, and it was just great. And she walks as well as I do.
What were you going to say?
Do you have some of the caregivers, once they lose their loved one, do they come back and be
Yes.
a volunteer?
When their loved one dies, they might, some don't take a break at all, they're back, but some may take a brief break. A lady told me at the Lobster Fest that the Episcopal Church does to raise money for us, she came up to me and said, I'm coming back because I know so much now that I can do. Yes,
We participate, we're a Methodist, of course, our church, but down the street, the Baptist church has a respite care, but it's just one day a week. But I wonder why they don't do it more than one day a week. I've never asked them. So do you have data that says, I guess that's better than nothing, is what I'm thinking. Do you really need to do it 5 days a week or 4 days a week? Or
we really recommend to people when they launch a respite ministry to strongly consider, and we'll work with you to show you how to do this too. We'll help you recruit the director, but we really recommend beginning with 2 days a week. Because this is such a meaningful, once people get used to their community. See, it's a fresh expression of church. This is not a program. This is going to be their church. This is where they're going to worship. And
it could be the loss of volunteers, that they don't have enough maybe to do it more than one day.
It could be, but
they've told us many times that sometimes that first Thursday of the month, it's difficult to get a lunch together and down there. But we make it happen, and I know they're appreciative for it. So I just wonder.
I'm glad you're asking questions about that, because everybody needs to look at their situation, and sometimes, like we have probably 15 or so churches, as well as the synagogues that contribute volunteers. So it's not limited to just your church members. The community wants it.
And it takes, I understand, they tell us 2 volunteers per client.
That's generally about
the help that you need.
Generally about what we do. What were you going to say?
My question is how you interact with the other helping agencies, other volunteer organizations, your hospice, agencies. but also your healthcare and social service support community, so that becomes complementary and not viewed in other ways.
Right. We have our directors be our face with those agencies in the community. And often, and you may want to say a word about this, John, but I attended a meeting the other day at our church where they had invited the care partners, the family members, to come in, and they will have a social worker speak from one of our agencies, or they'll have a neurologist speak. So we build connections. What they usually recognize and realize is we are providing something nobody else is doing for their patients, their clients, their caregivers. So we're a solution, and we find that we've been greeted with appreciation by that. So a lot of social workers especially really do get it. We've just never had, the classic example, you're familiar that in many communities you have an Alzheimer's Resource Center. The Alzheimer's Resource Center in Dothan, Alabama, which is 80,000 people, 400,000 in the surrounding area, their director retired, and their board started looking at directors, and they came to First United Methodist Church in Dothan, and they said, you're already doing in your respite ministry what needs to happen. How about if we take all of our resources and you become the Alzheimer's Resource Center for the area? So it's the community saying, you're showing us how we can work together.
And we have a support group too that meets at least twice a month, I think. They meet for the caregivers. So caregivers, during respite, caregivers can go down the hall and our director meets with them and brings in all those services. So that's where a lot of the services will come, and she'll bring in the directors of those services and all their information. But the Rosemary House is the perfect place because that's where they really come together. In Dothan, all of their resource people come to that Rosemary House and support everybody through that.
How can this template translate to a small rural community church?
Well, thank you very much. And we're doing that right now with a lady in a small town in Idaho who contacted us. And so, because there's more than one way to do this. It's not one size fits all. That's part of where we interact over a period of time and say, what do we tailor to fit what you got in your situation? Our website is respiteforall.org, and the slides that he showed are on a new website called lawsonbryan.org, and if you go there, that what he just put up there is there. But the respiteforall.org is the main website of the whole ministry, and but it's very important what you just said, that we have tailor it to situations. Also, Dr. Fayrine Epps is an African-American nursing professor at Emory who's now been given an endowed chair at University of Texas Nursing. She's on our board of directors. She has a grant to work with 60 African-American congregations in teaching about dementia. So we're working in that area too. Thank y'all for the chance to be together.